The Interludes. The King. King Adelard Baudelaire stood before a large window in one of his palace's hallways, gazing out at a dark horizon. Where night should have reigned in totality, there were instead distant glints of fires, like 10,000 fallen stars, resting eerily on the plain south of the capital. The armies of Cataraqua made their way from Worcester to Eastgate unopposed. Morning would arrive over Turris Regis within the hour. Soon the city would be awake, and all the petty nobility would be nipping at his heels like undomesticated dogs. In the same way the sun would rise to blot out the distant fires of the Elmes, so too would the lords and ladies of Trevellar block out his time and thoughts. Years of work tumbling down atop me. All of the planning, plotting, spying, and waiting, and the Dark Ones had unveiled themselves too soon, far too soon. King Baudelaire sighed and stepped forward, leaning onto the windowsill where the early morning breeze could run its fingers through his graying beard. The outer courtyard of the palace lay below him, the manicured plants and bushes of the garden now leafless. The crickets, usually chittering away through the night, had gone, and with them all color and signs of life. A familiar, if depressing, late autumn drab, which lasted only until the first snowfall, ornamented the world with white powder. Snow. Adelard groaned. Of all the problems he had, the inevitability of being under siege during the winter was by far the worst. The Elmes would be consumed with Eastgate for weeks or months, but not forever. Lord Hendrion was a shrewd man and would hold the city for as long as he could be expected, but Adelard doubted they would hold for more than a month. But whether weeks or months, Eastgate would fall just as Worcester had, and like Turris Regis would, if Prince Bastian did not return with aid from the Republic. Delroy, Adelard called out, not bothering to turn. There was a shuffling of steps behind him, then the slow and intentional voice of Adelard's longtime advisor. Yes, your Majesty. Any word from the prince? There has not yet been word from the prince or princess. I asked only of my son. I assumed too much, Delroy said, his voice flat. Indeed, if my daughter cared for the welfare of this kingdom, she'd be either here or at Eastgate, not tramping off into the south. Of course, Your Highness. Adelard slammed an open palm against the stone sill of the window. I'm done with her. Speak of it no more. As you command, Delroy said, his slow tempo dragging out the words the way a methodical seamstress might slip thread through the eye of a needle. The king sighed, knowing they would, in fact, speak of it again. Posture as he might, it was no small feat to throw out a potential heir to the throne, especially during a time of war. What of our rangers? What is the news of Eastgate? The reports through the night have been few. It would appear the Elmes know they have scattered our forces at Worcester, but instead of pressing their advantage, they linger. They test their Maia against the Eastgate walls, but no more. Maia. Adelard sneered the word. They have all the power of the gods, and yet they toy with us. It makes no sense. Adelard turned away from the window. Delroy stood straight, his dark skin and salted beard a stark contrast against the torchlit white stone behind him. His nose stood out boldly on his face, giving the spectacles alighted there a look of frailty. The creases around his eyes and near the base of his nose, which both showed his age as well as giving him a look of eternal gravitas. The king stalked off down the hall, and Delroy followed. Adelard's military boots thudded against the stone floor, muffling Delroy's pursuing steps. The king had been wearing them, along with his sword and chainmail, ever since Worcester. He dressed for war each day, hoping the nobility would take heed and end the petty squabbles. It hadn't worked. How do we fight gods, Delroy? It is frustrating, Your Majesty, Delroy said as they walked, though perhaps gods is a touch too heretical. The Yelmes are inhuman, surely, defiled even, but not gods. Don't toy with me. Perhaps the first place to begin would be in attempting to understand what it is they want. We've had spies lurking in their borders for 50 years and still do not know what they want. I want to know more than just troop movements. I want to know them and whatever weaknesses they have. I wholly agree, Delroy said. Take what we know, all our reports, our findings, and put together a group of Maifa scholars. Adelard did not need to turn to see the crinkle of Delroy's ever-suspicious eyes. Yes, Delroy, the Maifa. Go to the university, bring every one of them that has studied Katsuraka with anything more than a passing glance. Bring them here to share what we know. The king halted, twisting about and pointing a finger which nearly impaled Delroy's eye. Everything. We need answers, and we need answers today. This isn't the time for your damned conspiracies. A pause stretched out between them as Delroy wrestled the inevitable words from his lips. Yes, Your Majesty. Adelard grunted, then turned and continued down the hall, passing beneath smooth stone archways, adorned with ornate carvings of flowers budding on thorny vines. They approached a large set of oak doors flanked by silent guards. As the king marched forward, the guards reached out and pushed open the doors, the well-oiled hinges hardly making a sound. The throne room was sparse, but somehow more extravagant in its scarcity. Tall pillars supported a distant ceiling, and stained glass windows consumed vast swaths of the outer wall. The colored glass remained dark in anticipation of the early morning sun. At the far end of the room stood two doors, the top of which reached just shy of the ceiling. Once a week, those were opened, allowing a small stream of common folk to petition the king. Or rather, that was how it was intended. More and more, Adelard found his time taken up with the nobility, marching in through the same set of doors he had emerged from. They demanded his time, their money bags all but jingling before him. The throne itself sat on a dais, fashioned from solid steel and meticulously carved cedar. Beside it stood two tall candelabras, the only source of light this early in the day. More and more, the whole dais became like an anvil, beckoning him to sit and be bashed upon the hammers of worry and plight. Adelard blew air through clenched teeth. Your Majesty. Yes, we have a visitor. The king turned, eyes narrowing. He looked at Delroy, then followed the man's spectacled gaze toward the large set of doors at the end of the room. There, puffing a small pipe that flared red in the shadows, stood a man in the dark blue cloak of Adelard's rangers, the king's spear. Cachet, Adelard called out, giving a beckoning wave. I am glad to have you. I've begun to fear the worst. Cachet bowed low, his lit pipe held to the side. Arise, arise, Adelard said, waving his hand dismissively as he turned and approached the throne. He removed the sheath from his belt, leaning it beside the throne, before turning and sitting heavily upon it. I haven't the time nor patience. My liege and my lord. Oh, let me try a different voice. My liege and my lord, Cachet said, putting out the pipe and placing it into a pocket of his cloak. There is much news. Far too little time, I am afraid. I abhor cryptic words. My apologies. Eastgate stands. Lord Hendrion has prepared it well. They have food stores plenty, and wells that run deep within their city. They should not lack food nor water through the winter. After a small pause, he said, I have seen these stores myself, Your Majesty. Adelard nodded, envious of Hendrion. Turris Regis was without such stores. Still, they had the sea behind them, and the Yelmes had never shown much in the way of a navy. That, at least, was a blessing. What else is there? This is not a season for good tidings. Cachet nodded. Lord Hendrion lacks much in the way of trained troops. He has armed every man and woman he can until the street urchins wield kitchen knives like swords. But the reinforcements from Folin and South Fern never arrived, and so the losses sustained at Worcester have hardly been recouped. Adelard's fingers turned white as he squeezed the arm of his throne. And the call to arms? I sent the decree a month ago. Have my lords and ladies not had time to send aid? Lady Interest has mustered more than 1,000 in Southfern, equipping them with armor and spears, but they did not make their way to Eastgate, nor do they march for Tercery just now. Cachet let his words sit in the air between them. Adelard felt his neck begin to flush red, but he waited for the ranger to continue, his body taut in the waiting. His daughter warned of this, which did nothing to lift his mood. Cachet coughed to the side, then said more quietly, They linger within their city. The Dark Ones have sent sorties into the countryside, and these mustered troops would stand little chance in open warfare against them. So Lady Interest keeps them back to protect her own walls. Other nobles are doing likewise. Lord Finran, Lord Grisson, Lady June, Lady Thelanor. Each have mustered troops, but have yet to send them out of fear that they will only perish along the way. The sorties, Adelard roared. Eastgate stands ready to fall, and next the capital, and they talk of sorties. Cachet said nothing, only lowered his head. Insolent fools, the king sneered, slapping his hand upon the armrest. They'll be the death of us because of their pride. Spread apart, the Yelmes would eat us up. We'll be fish in a stream. They'll be the bear plucking us from the water one by one. Your Majesty, Delroy said, his voice slow and even, you speak truth. However, our nobles look out for their own lands also, for their people who are their charges. To send their soldiers through dangerous terrain to muster here, and then leave their own lands defenseless. He trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. And so they will leave our whole land defenseless? Do not try to sympathize with cowards. It is not becoming of you. Silence settled in the room. Through the opened side door, the marching of patrolling guards could be heard, as well as a faint chattering of distant maids, but nothing else. Finally, Cachet let out another cough, bringing the king's eyes back toward him. There's more, then? The king asked, his brow furrowed. My rangers have been following smaller Yelmes companies throughout the south. I hoped, as they reported on their movements, I would be more able to assemble a picture of our enemy. And generally, there is nothing to report. 40 or 50 troops on foot patrolling a few mile wide radius from the main body. Yet we have had one anomaly. 2 of these sorties coalesced near Gloken. We expected an attack on the town, but instead they headed further south. They moved with speed, Your Majesty, and such as we had not seen before. Adelard scratched his chin. That'd be too small a force to march on Southfern. Cachet looked about as if suspicious of the walls. Delroy, sensing the mood, walked over to the open doors, and with a quick word to the guards, closed the doors with an echoing thud. The ranger turned back to the king, his voice a touch quieter than before. I sent 2 of my men to follow. It was not until the Yelmes passed by Southfern and stormed through the forest that they understood. Cachet swallowed. My king, we believe they were in pursuit of the princess. Adelard's breath became shallower. That is not possible. She left in secrecy, with subterfuge on top of subterfuge. I had not known she was leaving. She could not have been followed. Cachet shook his head. I know not, my king, how. Her company should not have been on the main road until the Southfern forest itself. By my honor, I do not know how word reached Katsaraka. How many, Your Majesty? How many of the Dark Ones follow her? How many days' march are they behind her? How many days old is this news? As he went on, he came to his feet, his voice rising with him. Perhaps a full 100 strong follow the princess. We do not know how far they will linger behind, perhaps a day, or perhaps they have already overtaken her. And this news is long in coming, more than 3 days old since I've heard, and more days atop that. Adelard's knuckles whitened. Delroy set a company of riders for the south towards... Where was it she had gone? I swear that woman will bring me to my grave. Delroy did not move, but stood with his arms behind his back, his head bowed. Delroy. The older man looked up with a sigh. Of course, Your Majesty. I can send riders for Spectare at your command. They will be weeks in arriving, however, and not strong enough to fight 100 or more Yelmes in open combat. Are you saying my daughter is not worth the effort? Delroy's eyes met Adelard's own like a lance to a shield. I am saying the princess is beyond our reach, as you warned her she would be. Adelard stared at Delroy, his teeth grinding loud enough to echo faintly off the walls of the room. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead, and his fingers grew sore as he squeezed them into his palm. I should have thrown her into the dungeon. Princess Leonie is no fool, Your Majesty. She managed to leave with a company of your finest, so she is not defenseless. She may well return to you. May. That word hung before Adelard like a blade of a guillotine. The side doors to the throne room burst open, letting in light and noise from the hallway, as well as 3 old men in the fine white robes of the Order of Deos. Priests. Adelard nearly pulled his sword free of its scabbard then and there. My king, one of them called, running as fast as his decrepit legs would carry him, we demand an audience. Confused, guards spilt into the room behind them, their spears wavering. A commoner, or perhaps even a noble, would have been skewered as they attempted to barge down the door to the throne room, but a priest of the order, killing one of them meant eternal torment. Elatus, Adelard said, what is this? Elatus ran toward the king, the skin of his shaved head reflecting candlelight and beads of sweat. His eyes were wide, making his bushy gray brows chase up his forehead. The order does not demand your attention lightly, King Baudelaire, Elatus called out, voice hoarse and breathless. But Deos has given a revelation to us this night. Not an hour ago. We made haste first for your chambers, but you were not to be found there. I did not wish to be found at all. Adelard glanced from Elatus to the priests flanking him. He was required to deal with the high priest on occasion, an unfortunate byproduct of ruling by Thea and Toli, or divine mandate. But priests other than Elatus, that was incredibly rare. Speak quickly, Elatus, or your thin robes will not protect you from this offense. An empty threat, but Elatus bristled at it all the same. Take care Deos' favor does not depart from your bloodline, King Baudelaire. Then, before Adelard could so much as grind his teeth, Elatus shook his head and said, Bah, we have no time to spar words. Our message is far too urgent. And that is? Adelard said, a growing tickle of dread rising up in his mind now as he looked at Elatus, seeing the fear gnawing at the edge of the man's eyes. Elatus turned to Delroy and Cachet, flicking a hand in dismissal. Leave. Delroy's eyes grew a fraction wider, but neither he nor the ranger moved. Out, Adelard said. Let the old bag speak in secret, so the moment can pass. The 2 bowed and then left, the guard retreating alongside them as the door clanged shut. Adelard said, If this is one of your religious games. It is no game. Many in our order, myself included, have received revelation from Deos this night. There has been a great awakening in the south. A darkness we thought would slumber forever has awoken. The south. Adelard's thoughts went to Leonie, and he had to fight to keep his voice flat. And what is this great awakening? Elatus breathed in deep and brought a hand up to his temple. He looked every bit the prude he had been when he tutored Adelard as a child. What do you know of the old war? Do you think I do not know my own kingdom's history? Adelard stood, hand moving to the sword leaning beside the throne. Elatus hustled his words along. There are tales we tell common folk, and to the nobility as well. And then there are the truer histories of Trevlar. Histories with details that may lead the flock astray, as it were. I am aware of your machinations, high priest. Your schemes in the name of the divine are not as well protected as you perhaps think. The old man pressed his lips together. Well then, tell me, have you ever heard the name Starodavna?